Hi, everyone. I'm Nadia Shah, and welcome to another interview where we get to celebrate and introduce you guys to some of the incredible astrologers that we have up and coming with the ISAR Symposium. And the ISAR Symposium is going to answer the question, or at least explore the question, what is astrology? It takes place online August 28th, 2021. And you can learn more about that and sign up in the links in the description below. Well, today I'm very happy to celebrate with you Nina Gryphon. Nina Gryphon is a practicing astrologer and corporate lawyer living in Los Angeles. Now, that's something personally I really like. I like an educated person. So I love that about her. And you will see that she's brilliant in so many ways because I've had the chance to speak to her before, but her predictions have appeared in major publications. She's been interviewed on radio and TV, and her talk is going to be oriented towards astrology, our path to the divine. Welcome, Nina. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for interviewing me, Nadia. This is such a pleasure.
Well, I was so excited to interview you because I think what you do is fascinating. I've known you for a few years. I think you're brilliant. And so I was like, I gotta interview Nina. I want to interview you. I remember like emailing you a couple of times to just make that very, very clear. So I'm so happy that you are here. And so what are you excited about with this symposium?
Probably the number one thing for me, and this is probably my overly educated side coming out, is I love being able to opine on the big questions like what is astrology and how does astrology work? But the truth is that we don't, even as astrologers, we don't often get asked that question because people usually want to know how to do astrology or they want to know specific things, which is totally legitimate. But it's very rare somebody comes to you and say, you know what, just talk to us for 30 minutes about what you think astrology is. So I'm like, yes, it's an opportunity of a lifetime. And what I love is that obviously we have a range of voices in this conference, right? We have such a wide span of experiences and types of astrology. And so for me, coming at it from a traditional astrological perspective, and in this particular case, astrological magic, the idea of using sort of electional astrology to create talismans or to create intentions and rituals, however you may want to put it. I think it's very exciting because I think it blends the modern with the idea of, intentionality and personal evolution and development. And then you combine that with these really ancient techniques of what they used to call magic. And so, anyway, I'm very excited to be able to show this side of astrology to people who may not have had a lot of exposure to it. And so I think there are probably still some preconceptions about what it is and what it isn't, just because, it is like a niche within a niche, right? So anyway, I'm very excited to be sort of part of that larger group and also to be able to hopefully showcase, this really cool area of astrology that I have just spent, many years digging into and practicing.
Well, I know that, if I may say, I know that you're a nerd like me. And so that is something that I really like about you, among other things that I like about you. And so this whole exploration of magic and astrology, like this is part of the roots of what we do. And I know that you know so much and you practice so much related to astrology and magic.
Yes, yes, that's exactly right. So I got, and just as by way of background, I got interested in astrological magic. I mean, I got interested probably about 20 years ago, but I didn't really kind of get into it until about 15, 16 years ago or thereabouts. And I started making talismans and I had a few like successes, but also a couple of like kind of spectacular, I wouldn't even call it a failure, but like a blow up, like a lab blow up, kind of
I
thing.
love it. I love it. Yeah,
Yeah,
what's an astro magician without one or two lab blowups in our history? Yes,
you are
absolutely.
so right. You are exactly right. And I do tell this to my students. I teach a class about this once a year, how to do it for yourself. And I always tell people, look, don't be too tough on yourself. If a talisman, it works, but it doesn't work the way that you intended, because, it's an experimental art, right? It's not like, yes, there are books about this, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to do it for yourself. You have to try it out and, just see how you sort of vibe with these different planetary configurations. And so, the main thing I always tell people is don't be too tough on yourself. Every talisman can be destroyed if it's not working the way you want, right? But that is the learning experience because you realize you're like, maybe having like a, I don't know, debilitated Saturn on the ascendant for my election was kind of a major problem. Even if I tried to kind of wish it away, right? So it's just part of the education. And I hope that I share some of that excitement and some of that experimental and improvisational nature of it with people in this talk.
And I think that's part of the fun. I mean, that's what draws people to, sure,
Mhm.
astrology as a whole, I think, because
Yeah.
it is about sort of trusting yourself and trusting your judgments, but also, especially astrological magic. Part of the fun is the experimentation, figuring out what works for you and figuring out, like, just like you said, if there's an election where you don't have a strong Saturn on the ascendant, you learn from that. You learn from your outcomes. Like, I'll give you one example. I remember launching something new, and because this is what I do full time as an astrologer, constantly presenting new things. And I remember once launching something new right at a new moon. So the new moon was technically dark, right? It's right at the new moon. And
Yeah.
this was a huge learning experience for me because nobody really knew about this. Nobody knew about it. And that's when I
Yeah.
learned, okay, try to have the moon at least 9 degrees away from the sun when you are going to launch something new. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is the kind of stuff that, it's not really in books. So it's you again, just as you experienced, right? Some things you just have to learn on your own and but you'll never forget it. I guarantee you that, right? Like you will always remember this particular astrological lesson. So exactly. I think I just want to get people to kind of try things for themselves and recognize that, we can teach you so much and then at some point you just have to go out and apply it and then, observe.
And so, when do you remember your very first magical experimentations?
Mm. So I would probably say this is really interesting. So I made my first kind of for real talisman, like I said, about 15 or 16 years ago. And this might be somewhat technical, but it was a lunar mansion talisman. And I'm sure some of your audience will know about lunar mansions. And so this lunar mansion was supposed to be really good for like getting jobs. And I really wanted a better job. And I had a very specific list. The problem is, or it's not even a problem, but the other sort of flip side of this lunar mansion is it's not so good for relationships. So I got an awesome job, but the relationship I was in also ended, And so, yes, you can read about it and you can read these attributions in a book, but until you experience it, that, in my experience at least, you're not really qualified to tell other people what will happen until you've sort of lived it. And so I feel like that's the first thing I did. And boy, have I learned a few things since then.
Yeah, it's very powerful when we consider what we're aligning our energy with. And it's an archetype or it's archetypal, but
Yeah.
those archetypes have these ways and nuances of coming forward that we don't always anticipate, but they will make themselves known, especially when we consciously align with them.
That is so true. And that's what I'm very excited about because often we tend to think of them as, oh, like it's an archetype. It's kind of like this abstract thing. But you're like, no, they're actually kind of like living beings in a way, right? And
Wow.
just like approaching a stranger on the street, you might get a good response or a bad response. Now, of course, we have indications for knowing what kind of response you'll get because of the astrology, right? But at the same time, there's just no replacement for that personal experience and for that personal encounter with these, divinities or spirits or whatever you want to call them.
Right, or energies within ourselves, however it is that you want to
Hmm.
understand it. It's like meeting ourselves in new ways and in ways that we hadn't anticipated. And especially when you're doing it consciously, as you do with astrological magic,
Yes.
yeah, the results can be especially interesting sometimes.
Exactly, exactly. No, we'll have to talk offline at some point about all the different astrological magical experiences we've had. I'm sure you have a few stories. We all have a few stories.
Oh, for sure. I remember many years ago, I wrote one of my academic papers on the Picatrix. And the Picatrix is one of these foundational texts. For those who don't know, I know that Nina knows, but it is a foundational text to astrological magic, and especially Western esotericism as well. So it's a very powerful text to consider. And I remember trying out some of these magical experimentations, and I was like, oh boy, yeah. It was it was really interesting how things came together. What you think is love, if it's not, it goes away. And the
Yes.
love that you find may be very unanticipated and very often can be within yourself. and what is prosperity, and even as clearly as you're envisioning it and aligning with a particular talisman or ritual. Prosperity itself has so many different definitions. So these are just some ways in which astrological magic can come together in ways that surprise you. But I will say one thing I've learned, if I could say one big lesson I learned in my explorations in astrological magic, it is that if you feel that you need to do magic to keep a dude or attract a dude or get a dude to get back together with you or something, that is not the dude for you. That is one thing I learned very clearly. Yeah. That may not be the dude for you. Yeah.
No, that's very true. And it's really interesting, right? Because especially I think when people get into magic, they get drawn in by the promise of some kind of gain, whether it's love or whether it's, money or whatever. And the thing is, the
Power.
more you
Yeah.
do it, or power, the more you realize, the more you do it, you realize this is actually about developing yourself. Like, yes, you can get these things along the way, although as you said, be careful what you wish for, right? Um, if you do it more, you'll find out that really it is like a path to the divine. I mean, I chose that title very consciously. It's about sort of growing as a person. And which, if that was the advertising, nobody would ever do it because that sounds super boring, right? But if you can promise people like love, money, and power, that's what brings them in. And like I said, you get it, but it's really part of a larger path to develop yourself. So I hope that, both of those facets come through in my talk.
I'm sure that they will. And, it's interesting that you say that, because the subtitle to the Picatrix is "The Goal of the Wise," or "The Way of the Sage," is how that is translated. And that is something I always try to emphasize as well, that this is about the pathway to wisdom. And as you call it, the path to the divine. And that divine is within. It's the experience of the divine itself that ultimately is the higher aim of any kind of magical practice. So I love that you're affirming that in the title.
Exactly, exactly. This isn't just about getting the dude or keeping the dude.
I know, right? Screw the dude. Thank God
That's
that dude's
right.
not here. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Maybe it gives you the wisdom to realize that is not the dude for you, but that's a different story
Yes.
for a different time.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, look, that is a huge wisdom to realize, but I do want to, put that in context. This was years ago. So that dude came and went, and I've learned other lessons along the way where it comes to magic and where it comes to all kinds of wonderful things that life has to offer. Well, Nina, I love you. I adore you. You know this. And thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
I think the only thing I want people to know is obviously come to my talk, but I'm really hoping that I get people coming to the talk who have had no exposure to astrological magic. I'm trying to reach the newbies because I think it's so exciting, and especially people coming from like a Jungian background or a psychotherapy background. I think this can be very intriguing in its own way. So, like I said, I hope that we get kind of a wide range of people listening.
Yeah, me too. And I know I'm going to be very excited listening to your talk as well. And I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you, Nina, for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nadia. This was really fun.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for watching, and we will see you at the online symposium, ISAR's online symposium, August 28th, 2021, and links and more information are in the description below. Thank you for being here. Bye.